Well, hello everyone. I'm Jill Bloom, publisher of Walls and Ceilings, Roofing Contractor and Building Enclosure. Art Aisner and I, the editor of Roofing Contractor, are honored to be visiting again today with Trent Cotney, the CEO of Cotney Construction Law. Trent has become the legal voice of the industry, especially since he has offices all over the country. And in almost no matter what state you reside, Trent and his army of attorneys have the ability to solve just about any issue you may have. But Trent's love for the industry really drives him to be an incredible advocate. And Trent is always so very gracious with his time and gives back more than anyone I know, especially to the associations that also serve all of us and bring us together when we're not in lockdown. So Trent, thank you so much for your time. We're excited to hear what nuggets of insight you may have for us today. And let's start off with, though, Trent, tell us any update on the legal challenges to the executive orders from President Trump to help with COVID-19 relief?
Yeah, it's been a really busy week, and I want to welcome all the listeners. I enjoy being able to do these weekly updates. Jill and Art, appreciate your time, and I think one of the things I want to kind of hit home with the executive order that came out a week or so ago is it's going to take time to get this implemented. And what we've seen and what we continue to see is a lot of political wrangling, right? It was very interesting this week. We had South Dakota's governor, who's gotten a lot of news recently, came out and said, we don't need the unemployment federal benefits. We're doing so great. We're the best state in the world, and we don't need them. And then you've had I've seen, New York and California's governors both come out and say, this isn't for us. It's ridiculous. How are we supposed to do this? The problem that you're seeing is really there's four components to that executive order that came out, and everyone is right now is focused on the unemployment insurance. Okay, the additional benefit that goes out there that the federal government was going to provide. The problem with it is that it has to be implemented by the state, and then there is a state component that goes with that. So it has not come to fruition as of yet. Okay, I anticipate that for those states that are willing to move forward with it, you're looking at maybe a couple of weeks, and it is supposed to go back to August 1st. Okay, so there is a retroactive component, but which states are going to opt for it, which states aren't, how that's all going to work, it is something that is going to take a lot of time. And when you're dealing with the government, there's one thing that you can absolutely guarantee is it won't happen quickly. So I think that's one of the reasons why there's still this big push to get Congress to approve something, because that could provide some more immediate relief.
So Trent, is there anything contractors can really rely on right now? We know the House has been called back, but is anything related to COVID relief that contractors can hope for?
Yeah, so there is, as I mentioned, there are four parts to that executive order, and there's a lot of additional verbiage that came out in the memorandum along with it. But there is the payroll tax, the student loans, and the evictions portion of it. Okay, so with regard to the student loans, that any loan that's been issued by the Department of Education, there's still that grace period up through the end of the year and interest free. Okay, that has gone into effect. Okay, you still got to pay it right now, but again, there's been some promises depending on what happens that it may go away. Okay. On the payroll tax, again, this is the employee portion. So that has some immediate impact, some immediate relief. But again, what happens, is that something that has to be repaid? What is that going to look like? Don't know. Okay. And then finally, the evictions. On the eviction side of thing, it was more of commentary. It was like, we need to look into this. How can we avoid, evicting people during these times? What, directing HUD and other government agencies to take a look at it. But there was no definitive relief other than the suggestion that there be additional surveys and things done to kind of figure out how they can help. So contractors right now, they can count on the fact that something is going to happen at some point. That is about as much as I can say right now. I will say that with regard to that employee payroll tax portion and the student loans, that is something that if you have to look at the executive order, you could say, okay, this did happen now. I do anticipate that those unemployment benefits are going to roll out. Okay, so if you have people that have been laid off or furloughed, or you're kind of contemplating bringing them back at some point, this may be some additional income that they can access during that period.
Uh, are your contractor clients, are they plugged into this issue, or are they really focused on other things as they're trying to maintain, their business? And what are those things that they're concerned about?
Yeah, so, from a contractor standpoint, they're basically in the same position as any owner of any business, okay? And from their perspective, they're concerned about keeping production up, okay? I've started to hear consistently throughout the United States now that backlog that they had for 6 months is gone, okay? The backlog is gone. It's basically hand to mouth, and that's what I've heard. I've heard, for example, Northeast, Pacific Northwest, a lot of weakness right now, okay? California's been hit pretty good. Even stronger markets, Florida, Texas, southern type markets, again, other than storm work, which I'm sure we'll talk about, there's been, that backlog has been drying up, especially on the commercial end. Residential continues to remain somewhat strong, but I think contractors are still primarily concerned about production, making sure that they're bidding competitively, that they're converting those contracts over. And along those lines, from our perspective, keep in mind, one of the things that I'm always looking for to understand what's going on in the industry is the feedback that I'm getting from contractors. And I can tell you that we've had to switch up how we review contracts. One of the things, the messages I'm getting now from a lot of contractors is, tell me, guide me through this, tell me what my issues are. Let's go through and focus on the key issues, which is what we always do. But there's always the but at the end, but I really need this job. So a lot of times our role is to educate contractors and say, look, here are really bad provisions for you. You got to understand that this is a big gamble. And a lot of times what we're doing is we're basically the odds makers, okay? Using a Vegas analogy, when contractors come to us in this kind of time, we say, look, if you're going to bet on this, here's your chances of success given what you got in front of you right now. Okay, you got a lot of risk. You need to know what you're looking at, okay? And that's one of the things we do. There's still room for negotiation. Don't get me wrong. There's still that room. But I think there is, with the backlog drying up, I've heard a lot of contractors, I can hear that concern on the other end of the line now.
Well, perhaps some relief or some of those worries, not so much on the production side, but could come in the way of liability waivers. And again, that does pertain to COVID-19 relief. The NRCA issued a formal action alert this week about that. Can you tell us more about that and what contractors can do to get involved?
Right. So we've been working with NRCA along with Dwayne Musser and their great lobbying team to make sure that contractors are aware of the necessity to advocate for these legal liability shields. It's very important that your voice is heard on this issue, okay? Regardless of what trade you're in, you need to make sure that you're contacting both your state and your federal representatives and senators so that they understand that you're letting the governor know that anything that you can do to make sure that your voice is being heard. Along those lines, Tennessee just passed its COVID Relief Act bill. And I was talking to our Nashville team up there about it, and it's a great first step. It does exactly what I said a lot of these bills are going to do, and that is it releases you from liability for unintentional exposure. But, it does carve out if there's, that willful, wanton, gross negligence, all these legal terms. If you intentionally did it, it's not going to protect you. But I think all contractors really need is that unintentional exposure. That's going to cut down tremendously on a lot of the personal injury type lawsuits, which I'm scared of right now. That's one thing that concerns me for the industry.
Got it. And is there an easy way for contractors to get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. Associations, I love associations. They are the voice of the industry. The reason why associations are so important now is what they do is instead of speaking out individually, and don't get me wrong, you have power as an individual. Don't think that you don't. Okay, you do. Your representative and senator wants to hear from you just as much as they want to hear from large groups. Okay, but when you're with a large group, like whether it's a regional or NRCA or even your local association, that gives you the capability of really putting some numbers and some power behind what you're saying. And that's the difference. And in addition to that, there's some money behind that. There's PACs, there's other things that a lot of these associations have that are very useful for purposes of making sure that your voice is heard.
Okay. I want to switch gears a little bit and let's talk about some recent storm activity. I was curious if you had any contractor clients in Iowa or Western Illinois that are dealing with the devastation from last week's derecho storm and what's going on there.
Yeah, so, first, I want to send my thoughts and prayers out to the family and the people that were affected. I do know several contractor friends of mine that actually, got impacted by some of that storm. So obviously, terrible event. And unfortunately, this time of year, you're going to get these types of storms. This was unexpected. Here in Florida, we're used to 100-mile-per-hour wind. I was joking around, that's a Monday for us. But when you face that kind of wind in Iowa, it's a different event. And a lot of the structures aren't necessarily built to withstand that kind of, intense wind. So a lot of the contractors that I've been talking to in that area, both in Iowa and Illinois, they are working around the clock. It is like a bomb went off. That's the best way to describe it. Almost every facility, regardless of whether it's a mall or a building, along with almost every residential structure, has some kind of damage, and they are having a tough time getting the supplies needed, getting the production needed. They're also dealing with out-of-state contractors coming in, and that's one of the things that you kind of face when these storms happen. So, understanding the rules and the regulations for that. If you are a contractor that's listening to this and you want to help and you want to go in there and do some work, you need to make sure that you understand what the rules and regulations are for each of those states before you do it, because each state has a different requirement. But overall, it's an opportunity for a lot of contractors, but I think it's also very difficult because many of their families and friends were impacted by it as well.
Right, and in a way, they may need some of that help from outside contractors to come in, at least initially, to help triage.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you mentioned supply lines. No doubt that a storm event like that is going to stress the supply lines currently out there, but we are starting to hear some rumblings about supply chain overall and companies stopping production on some products through the end of the year. Are there growing concerns about supply chain out there? Absolutely.
I've heard it. I've heard it in almost every sector of the U.S. And if I had to tell you, there was some concern with fasteners for a long time, especially those that were sourced from China. That's still a concern. But I think what's happened now is a lot of the manufacturers have scaled back production months ago, and whatever supply that the supply houses had that they were relying off the reserves are now gone. Okay, so when you have cataclysmic events like you see in Iowa, or we've got hurricanes coming, it's just a matter of time whether Florida or Texas get hit. That's going to put a big stress on what's out there currently in supply houses. So I think what you're starting to see is the ripple effect of some manufacturers reducing production. Clearly, this is not the case throughout everything. There's exceptions, but I am starting to hear concerns everywhere in the United States now about accessibility of supplies and the capability of being able to get them on a timely basis, especially in residential markets. There's some concern there that with COVID-related delays and other delays that are out there, that production is taking a lot longer. Instead of a 2-day tear off the shingles, put the shingles on next day, you're looking at a few weeks before they can even get started, and then it's a delay process, and it's just managing customer expectations at this point. So yeah, absolute concern. I think it's going to be a continued concern, especially if we have more storms like we saw in Iowa, because that's going to put a big strain, not just in the regional area right there, but a lot of times supplies are sourced elsewhere to help fill that need, and that's what's going to put a strain on everything nationally.
What are you telling contractors to do, if anything?
So one thing, I'm a big believer in being prepared. Be proactive rather than reactive. And if you can gameplay a lot of these types of things in advance, it's going to help you. So there's a couple of things that I really recommend. One is, and I know a lot of listeners out there, they're going to roll their eyes when I say this, but you got to look at your contract. Okay, you got to look at your contract, because you want to make sure you got a price acceleration provision in there that says that in the event that any material line item goes up by 5%, that the owner will automatically compensate you for that. Okay, you want to have something like that in there. Then you also want to take a step further and you want to say, due to COVID-19 and other related delays, there have been material shortages. Customer understands that there may be a delay on this project as a result, and something along those lines. Okay, so contractually, you want to make sure that you're protected. But more important, you want to make sure that you're managing your customers' expectations. Okay, so you clearly, salespeople are out there signing those proposals left and right, and that's great. Okay, the follow through is, hey, I just wanted to let you know this is what's going on. Okay, we are working, trying to get this to you as quickly as possible, but you need to understand here are the things that we're dealing with. And it's about being in front of them. Okay, if you wait until there's the delay and you don't say anything, that's when you get an angry customer, and that's unfortunately when usually I got to get involved. So.
Got it. Okay, well, let's switch gears to perhaps some more positive news. We just recently published another edition of the top 100 roofing contractors list. And on top of that, we also recently published a story about Inc. Magazine's 5,000 fastest growing companies. That seemed to draw a lot of attention from roofing contractors because more than 40 were on the list this year, almost 24 more than last year. So I was wondering, is this a good time to be a contractor, number one, and perhaps are roofing contractors doing a better job telling their stories?
Yeah, and first, kudos to you guys in the top 100. I think I've printed off my copy. It's on my bulletin board in my office. So I can't turn on social media now without somebody saying, "Hey, we made the top 100." So I think it's definitely something. There's a lot of pride that goes along with that. What was interesting about the article that you guys wrote on the additional contractors getting on the Inc. list is that I think you're starting to see roofing contractors fully grasp the power of perception, right? I think you're starting to see a lot of roofing contractors understand that marketing and branding is essential, okay? And part of that is making sure that you're visible and you're on these lists, right? So I think one of the differences is that, and I've got a lot of friends that are on both lists, and I think one of them is they're actually applying now. They're actually taking it serious and they're taking the time to apply. And it's not that they weren't always big enough to be on that list. I think a lot of them probably could have been and are just now doing it. For others, I know some contractors on there that have emerged quickly. And I do think, to answer your question, Art, even with COVID-19, even with all the bad news and everything else, it is a great time to be in construction, right? There is so much need out there. And I would tell you, I would put construction on top of any other industry right now because it doesn't matter what happens. It's resilient. You always need stuff to build and repair. You're just going to need it. It's not going to go away. It might change. What you might have to do might change. The ways you market might change. But at the end of the day, you still need a roof over your head. You still need a structure. Okay? It doesn't matter whether it's your home that's become your office or your office, So to answer your question, yeah, I think the industry is blessed, and I think it'll continue to be that way. And I'm putting my money down on construction.
Okay. What else is on your mind?
I would say, my concern right now is looking out in the future and making sure construction stays strong. Okay. And I read a very interesting study that was done recently by SMACNA, which is the Metal and Air Conditioning Contractors National Association. And they found that because of COVID, that there was an overall productivity hit of 17.9%, and which has caused a 7% financial loss for their contractors to comply with COVID. Okay, and this is what was really interesting. Again, this was a report from the New Horizons Foundation, which is the research arm of SMACNA. But it said that the average worker lost 85 minutes during an 8-hour day dealing with COVID-19. Okay, that seems pretty high, but if you think about all the times you've got to comply, the temperature checks, the questions, the putting on the mask, taking off the mask, the putting in the hand sanitizer, the doing this and the doing that, and and all the inefficiencies that are created by COVID-19, I got to tell you, it's definitely affecting productivity. It can't help but affect productivity. So what's interesting is, bid your contracts wisely. If you have to bid to take into account the inefficiency of COVID-19, If you're working a job and hoping you're going to get 8 hours in, you got to think, best I'm going to do is get 7 in because I got to comply with all this other stuff. And you've got to govern yourself accordingly. One of my favorite legal terms. That's one of the things you definitely have to do. But very interesting study. I had wondered whether or not there was a productivity hit there, and yeah, sure enough, there is.
All right, as always, Trent, thank you. Great insight. Jill, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Wow, thank you, Trent. There's no doubt that's some good insight. It looks like this is the time contractors can raise their prices and have good reason to do it.
Right.
But yeah, to everybody watching, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to Trent directly. And Trent, where can they reach you at?
Cotney at cotneycl.com, or go to our website right there.
Very nice. And if you need to reach us, please go to wconline.com or roofingcontractor.com. And while you're there, click on the Contact Us page and sign up for our free digital edition and our free e-newsletter, so you can always stay up to date with all the great interviews we're doing with Trent and with others in the industry. So everyone stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks again, Trent.